just made his debut on Dragon's Den, which is on BBC One. He's the youngest ever dragon. He's now a speaker, an investor, a content creator. He's the host of Europe's biggest podcast, Diary of a CEO. He's just released his book, Happy Sexy Millionaire, which is already in the Sunday Times bestseller list. And now he's moved into the world of investment. So with investments in social media, e-commerce, biotech, blockchain, he's betting his potential to spot the future and not a fad, investing in areas that he hopes will become the next trillion-dollar industry. So, Stephen, thanks.
Oh, thank you. And I have to say as well, I've been a big fan of yours and what you've done within the agency and marketing world over the last 20 years. So it's an honor to be interviewed by you, but it's also a huge honor to be at such a prestigious, immense event like Leap. So thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Some nice mutual love to start things off. So let's start at the beginning. So you were born in Botswana. Your family came to the UK when you were 3 years old?
Yeah.
And you grew up in Moss Side. For those of you that don't know, Moss Side, rough area of Manchester. You're the youngest of 4 children.
Yep.
Your mum and dad were pretty entrepreneurial, tried their hands at various different business ventures. Do you think it was your upbringing, their work ethic that played a part in you getting to where you've got to today?
100%. And actually for like really bad reasons. So typically when you hear of entrepreneurial stories, you think that they had like, you know, a really good parental upbringing which made them full of self-belief and conviction that they could. And in fact, from doing my podcast where I sit down with some of the most successful people in the world, entrepreneurs, athletes, everybody from Manchester United footballers to the biggest CEOs in the world, I've come to learn that it's in fact usually the opposite. It's actually usually that those people were like really insecure kids who had some kind of trauma in their early years, and that's probably the case for me. As I look back on my childhood, I was the only black kid in a school of about 2,000 white kids, right? So what that does is the first thing is you feel different. You feel like an increased desire to fit in. I always say the things that invalidate you when you're younger end up being the things you seek validation from as an adult.
Yeah.
And for me, we were the only black family. We were in a middle-class area, but we were very, very poor to the point that we were like verging on bankruptcy. I never had Christmases or birthdays. I'm always just trying to fit in and to be part of, you know, the group. And then the other factor which exacerbated all of this, and really I think that made me an entrepreneur, is when I was very young, my parents got so busy because things were hard financially that they were never in the house. So at 9 years old, I'm waking up and neither parent is in the house. And by the time I go to sleep, usually at like 2 a.m., neither parent is in the house. So you have this young kid who really wants stuff and is now being taught this kind of unfortunate lesson that it's not going to show up on the kitchen counter or under a tree, and that if you're going to have things, you're going to have to like sell something in the house or something of your parents sometimes in order to get the shoes or a bag. And that's what I did. I started a business at like 13 and then 14. And then by 15, I was running pretty much all of our school trips in our school. I'd done the vending machine deals for our entire school so that they didn't have to pay for vending machines anymore. I'd brokered this deal where we got the revenue from our machines. And then by 16, I was running in our local area in Plymouth pretty much all of the under 18 events through my company. And then, yeah, that was it. And I eventually got kicked out of school because when your parents aren't in there to make sure you're going, as a kid, you stop going. And I stopped going, so...
No, that's really interesting. So I know you got kicked out of school. You also dropped out of university, didn't you, after your one lecture? So was it just this sort of impatience, a desire to get going straight away, to start working?
Well, like, because I think because I've got such a huge... I had such a huge amount of independence as a young man, I find it really difficult, and this is maybe a causal factor of my success in life, is I find it really, really hard to stay for more than a short period of time in any situation in my life that's making me unhappy.
Yeah.
So the minute school, like I couldn't go to school, I just couldn't do it because I found it to be like a really unhappy place. I went off to university and I was there for one lecture. I look around the room and realize that this is in fact just school again. Everybody's sleeping on the desk and drunk. The person at the front of the lecture who was meant to be teaching me how to start businesses is showing me PowerPoint presentations and then asking me to, with crayons and a piece of paper, felt tips, to come up with a hypothetical idea. It didn't resonate with me, so I left. And I left without an idea, which is really like, if you look back at my life, even me quitting my businesses later in my life, I quit Wallpark. I started a business called Wallpark after university. I quit that out of the blue. I built Social Chain to being a business that was, at the time, doing about 300 million in revenue. Literally, the month where it started to feel miserable for me, I quit after 8 years. I'm a very good quitter. I quit with a real sense of internal peace and without much procrastination. And I think people don't talk about that enough because we glamorize starting as if it's the be-all and end-all. But the very important thing you have to do before you start anything in life is quit something else. And so being a fast, high-conviction quitter, I think, is very important.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's brave. So let's talk a bit about Social Chain. You started Social Chain in 2014.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gone on to be this great success.
Yeah.
I guess it was pretty early in the days of social media, certainly early in terms of the trends and the approach that you spotted. Where did the idea come from?
I would love to sit here and say I had some huge grand plan, but it's just not the truth. What typically has happened in my life is you notice something is happening based on first principles and truth before other people do. And always, when we have these new emerging trillion-dollar industries, what happens at the start is there is clear evidence that change is happening. There is clear evidence that social media is better as an advertising tool, or that the blockchain, as we're seeing right now, is a better system. But convention is the kind of arguing force that says that's not how it's supposed to be done. And in the early stages, a lot of people listen to convention. That's not how it's supposed to be done. And they're stubborn and romantic about convention. And you have a certain group of people, like Elon Musk and kind of the early innovators, who say, well, no, from a first principles perspective, this is a better solution. And for us, we were young kids that didn't know about convention. So when we started using social media to market things, apps at the time, and the numbers were way bigger than handing out flyers or putting up posters, to us, it was so obvious. It was so obvious. And we went to brands, and I remember going and meeting MTV and telling them about social media, and I remember them quite literally laughing at us. But that didn't seem to shake our conviction, because we knew that we could get anything in our country to become the #1 trending topic in about 20 minutes using social media. We knew that we could get an app to get 2 million downloads in a 24-hour period using social media, and we knew there was no other way to do that. So what it feels like is that there's a wave coming into shore. This is kind of how innovation feels. There's a wave coming into shore. You get to the point where you believe it's inevitable, and your job, if you want to be an innovator and capitalize on that wave, is to make sure you're at the right position on the incoming wave, and you're on the right surfboard. The surfboard is the team. And that's what I've done my entire life. And I'm doing it now with Web3 and the blockchain, is I know it's inevitable. And in fact, having people arguing with its inevitability and calling it a scam or a fad, for me, is a greater indicator that it's inevitable, because that is the arguing force that I always like to see when change happens.
And do you think, I mean, when I listened to you, I was also very young when I started my first company. I think sometimes youth and naivety can work to your advantage because you're just fearless and you have nothing to lose.
Yeah, I think people can become really encumbered. They can become really restricted by their experience and that idea of how the world is supposed to be. And I've even seen it within myself. So after doing social media for maybe 8 years, and what you end up doing is you end up building a set of beliefs about the medium in which you've built your life and your experiences. And then when something new comes along, I noticed myself with TikTok going, oh, that's stupid. That's ridiculous. And in there, I sound like the generation that came before me. I'm dismissing something because I don't understand it. Eventually, and it was the same with the NFT and the blockchain space, me thinking people are spending millions on digital pieces of art? That's stupid. That makes no sense. Whenever you do that, whenever you're so flippantly dismissive of a new thing, you're condemning yourself to, in my view, being left behind. So whenever I see myself falling into that pattern of behavior, being flippantly dismissive because I don't understand something, I remember that that's exactly what people did to me about social media. And those people lost. And I don't want to be ran over by the bulldozer of innovation that is behind all of us in all of our industries. None of our industries are here to stay. Not one of them. Not cars, not mobile phones, not social media. Even at some point in the future, NFTs and blockchain will be disrupted by something better. And it's our job to be fresh of mind, to be childlike, and to hold on to our sort of open-minded naivety.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I mean, so you've obviously got an ability to spot a trend, but interestingly, you stepped away from social chain when it was flying. Yeah. Was that a boredom thing? Was it like an impatience to get to the next thing? How hard was it to walk away from that?
Yeah, I have a bit of a quitting framework in my mind, which I only realized when I wrote my book, because I tried to make sense of the fact that I found it quite easy to quit, even if I've built a massive business and it's on the stock market and I've got 700 employees, that I still have a high amount of peace when I quit something. And for me, this is kind of where I got to in my mental flow quitting framework. I don't quit something because it's hard, right? A marathon is hard. You don't quit something because it's hard. However, I quit something when it begins to suck. And the way that I define the word suck, subjectively, it is subjective. For me, within my business, I got to a point where something sucked. The next question becomes, is the effort it would take to change the situation worth the reward on offer? You can apply this to relationships, careers, whatever you want to do. And for me, the effort it would have taken to change the situation I was in with my business wasn't worth the reward anymore.
Yeah.
To be honest, I'd been quite diluted as a young founder over 8 years. There was a big board of directors who had a different vision for the business. I was fighting against them to take it in another direction. So I thought to myself, do you know what? I'm young, I've got many ideas, I'm still a big shareholder in the company. You take the business in your direction. This is my time to step away, as you see a lot of young founders doing. Elon Musk did it with Zip2 and then started PayPal. Mark Cuban started a business at the same age as me, stepped away, he sold it for $6 million, and then made his next billion-dollar company. And my decision was to take everything I've learned. I've been in this business since I was 20. Everything I've learned, all the expertise I've built, and now go and apply that to something else. And so that's what I did. Yeah.
So it's fair to say you like to keep yourself busy.
Yes.
Where does the drive come from? What is it that keeps you going? You could probably put your feet up and relax.
Yeah, and again, when you ask me this question about what keeps me going, when I could just retire, I've actually, from sitting on my podcast and sitting with multi-billionaires, Olympic athletes, Premier League football stars, it's become really, really clear that having struggle in your life is, in fact, how we find our stability. So it's like one would think that the purpose of life is to get to the point where you have completed goals and millions in the bank so you can go and sit on an island. But it's so clear that that's actually the opposite. Our chaos, having things we're striving for and struggling about, is stability. The minute someone loses chaos in their life, the minute they're no longer striving, they get depressed. Olympians call it gold medal depression. Up to 80% of Olympians get depressed after the Olympics because they've got no more struggle, they've got no more striving in their lives. And if you think about why that might be, as humans, the reason why we're all here now is because of our ancestors who built empires. They struggled and they built, and they were tribal creatures who built together. So that's what we're supposed to be doing. So the idea that someday I'll sit on a beach and smoke a cigar and chill out horrifies me, because as a human, I'm meant to be striving. I'm meant to have a life full of voluntary struggle. So that's what I'm trying to do.
No, I get that. I mean, you see it with a lot of entrepreneurs who have made their billions but keep working.
And you're the same. You could have just put your feet up after you left Frank, but you decided...
I don't know what to do with myself. And I think the thing you realize with any business is the money isn't why you do it.
Exactly.
It's not your driving purpose. And when you stop chasing the dollars, you enjoy yourself, you do a better job. And I see that with lots of entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs that I work with. I think what I've always found interesting about you, sort of observing from afar, is you were one of the first entrepreneurs to use the power of social media to build a personal brand. And I hear this word, personal brand, I'm sure you all do, sort of used a lot, and it makes me cringe quite a lot. But you're brilliant at it. Does it make it harder? Does it put more pressure on you? I mean, how integral do you think your personal brand has been to the success that you've seen with your businesses and for you personally?
I think building a personal brand on social media has been the single most important thing that I've done in business over the last 10 years. You asked me the question, does it make it harder for me? It's made my entire life multiples more easy. I sat with Gary Vaynerchuk, who is a good friend of mine. He's known as having one of the biggest entrepreneur personal brands in the world. And the question I've asked him before is, if I made you turn off everything you do for marketing and you could only keep one thing that would keep your business growing, what would it be? And he said to me, without missing a breath, it would be building my personal brand on social media. We all know people buy from people. And if I asked you what the value of reputation is, what is the value of your reputation, you would say it's everything in business, right? And that's exactly what personal branding is. It's digital reputation. So I'll give you an example. I spend I have millions of followers on my Instagram, millions of followers on my other channels. The podcast, as you said, is the biggest podcast in Europe at the moment. And so when I go and pitch to a big brand, I remember I went and pitched to Logitech to do their social global media marketing. When I got in the room, they already knew who I was, and the 10 people I was pitching to asked to take a photo of me. And you can imagine what it's like trying to sell to someone after they've asked you for a photograph. And I use that example because what it shows is social proofing. I'll give you an example of what social proofing is. If you're walking down the street and everybody's looking up at a building, you will stop and look up at the building. Because as animals, as humans, we've learned to take our cues from the crowd. That's how we survive. So if a lion is coming and everyone starts running, you don't need to see the lion, you need to see that everybody's running. And that's effectively what building a big personal brand is. Everybody's looking up at the building. And in that, there's also this assumption when you have a lot of followers and people follow you for something, that your opinion holds greater truth and authority and significance. This is why they get doctors to sell you medical products and Lionel Messi or Ronaldo to tell you that a football boot is good because they have authority on the matter. It's the single biggest thing that has grown my business without a shadow of a doubt. And I remember actually in the first year of my company asking Lucy, Alex, and Sam that worked for me to tell me where the money that had hit our bank account had originated from. And they came back to me with this pie chart and said 70% of it comes from you speaking on stage or something you've done from your personal brand. That was year one. So what I did is I basically evaporated my sales team at Social Chain, basically killed the marketing team, and had 5 people in my office who would build my personal brand, which meant that for 4 years, I had a microphone on me at all times, and I had a full-time videographer who would record conversations like this. In fact, we have one now who sat here called Jack, who follows me around the world and produces our podcast. This video will go on all of my social media channels. It will reach hundreds of thousands of people, and it will have a cascading impact on my personal brand. The world has changed. In order to get publicity and PR, you don't need newspapers and TV anymore. You need the piece of glass in the palm of your hand. You are a publisher. You as an individual are a media company. And if you treat yourself like one, your life will be and your business will be very easy.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, unbelievably, we've already run out of time. I do want to ask you one last question, though.
Okay.
So when it comes to making that call on what's going to be a fad, or what's going to be the future, what do you think is more important, speed or bravery? Or both?
It's an interesting one. I've never resonated with the word bravery. And I'll tell you why, because when I dropped out of university, and I recite my story of not going to school and dropping out of university and starting this business, and my mum calling me and saying, Steve, I'll never speak to you again unless you go back to university. People look at that and say it's bravery. But I actually think, when I think about it, is I was a bit of a coward. And the reason why I say I'm a coward, and I feel like I've been a coward in those key moments where I've pursued an innovation or left university, is because for me, the goal in my personal life was to be happy. That is the ultimate North Star of my life, is to be happy or fulfilled, or however you want to define it. So the risk would have been staying at university doing something that made me miserable. Because if you're clear that that's the objective, the risk is anything that compromises it. So for me, my whole life, I've been bad at compromising the most important thing, which is being happy personally, and professionally, it's not being run over by innovation. So in fact, it feels more like being a coward. So I would say speed and, yeah, I would say speed.
Speed and knowing what makes you happy, I guess.
Yeah, but you know already. This is what I'm trying to say. You already know. Inside here, you know the truth if you'll tune into it. There's just a lot of noise outside, which might be your mum or convention or whatever else that's telling you to just, to obey the implicit instructions of society. So, but in here, I think people know. Yeah. I think they know.
Yeah, just got to find it. Well, listen. It's been an absolute pleasure. I think you've achieved so much. Brilliant to chat to you. I think if you don't follow Stephen on social media, make sure you do. If you haven't listened to his podcast, download it, Diary of a CEO. If you haven't read his book, Happy Sexy Millionaire, go out and buy a copy. Make him even happier. Thank you, Stephen. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It's a huge pleasure. Thank you. Thank you, Fred. Thank you.